Welcome to reInvent 2023. Super excited to see you here. How many of the audience has experience with mainframes or mainframe modernization? Awesome. There's so many of us really excited. For all of us who are used to mainframes and mainframe modernizations, we know that mainframe modernizations are very complex to execute, take a lot of time, are very expensive to do, and often end in failure. So I'm super excited to share with you how AWS is helping our customers reduce the time, cost, and risk of mainframe modernizations. And we are super excited also to welcome Casey O'Connor, who's the Senior Director of Technology and Technology Strategy and Modernization at the Cigna Group, and Thiago Moraes, who's the Head of Cloud Platform at Itaú Group. And both of them are going to share their experiences of modernizing complex mainframes using AWS Cloud technologies and AWS Mainframe Modernization. Let's get started. So mainframes have been around for several decades. They run 50 billion plus transactions every day, and world's top banks, world's top insurers, the largest public sector enterprises, retail companies, travel companies are using mainframes to drive transactions and core enterprise transaction processing. So with the advent of distributed computing a couple of decades ago, a lot of these enterprises started moving user interface and customer-facing applications onto AWS and other cloud and to distributed environments. However, they were lacking a scalable platform. But with AWS Cloud now being proven for large-scale mission-critical applications, we are finding that enterprises are starting to modernize their mainframe applications and move these to AWS Cloud. In doing so, we find that our customers are able to drive several benefits for themselves. First of all is cost savings. By modernizing legacy applications, customers are able to reduce costs coming out of proprietary hardware and software. They're also able to move away from peak load provisioning and move to a scalable platform like AWS. They're also able to use modern technologies to basically create new services and solutions and drive agility. Customers are able to leverage all the modern technologies in AWS, such as AI, ML, IoT, to drive both business insights and new customer experiences. They're able to use DevOps to drive down the time it takes to create new products and services and reduce those development cycles. They're able to use integrated tool sets, taking the time and cost out of procurement of these tool sets, and do that from a single platform. There are no limits to innovation. At this point, you are able to drive a lot of value out of the mainframe data by leveraging and bringing the mainframe data on a real-time basis into AWS and building on top of that. They're able to use a lot of technologies that we're able to offer to create cloud-native solutions and challenge digital native competitors in the market. You can get the resilience that you get from AWS Cloud. You're able to monitor all your mainframe applications and modernized applications on AWS Cloud, as well as your estate on AWS Cloud simultaneously, and derive the benefits of the cloud security and resilience. So before we go forward, we have a polling question. I'd love to hear from the audience on if and when you're planning to modernize your mainframes. Can you use this QR code and perhaps give us some responses? Oh, good. I think we see the results coming in. Could we see the results? Oh, that's amazing. Incremental migrations to cloud being the largest, almost exiting mainframe fully, all of the above, and with modernization. Super amazing. Thanks for that. If we get back to the slides. So thanks for sharing that. And we find that actually a lot of customers who are migrating their applications or modernizing their applications in the cloud are leveraging multiple patterns. Very quickly, the patterns that customers are leveraging most immediately are replication of mainframe data onto AWS Cloud on a real-time basis to build on top new applications, customer interface, and business insights. We're also seeing a lot of customers, as you said, exit the databases, exit the mainframe altogether, by replicating the mainframe and emulating the mainframe in the cloud using technologies such as Microfocus, Unikix, et cetera. We are also seeing a lot of customers starting to refactor their applications. We now have a lot of automated refactor tools such as Blue Age and Logica, which are actually allowing customers to convert COBOL, Java, EasyTree, Assembler into technologies and open technologies that can run very well on the cloud. We also have customers who are replacing business applications with repurchased commercial off-the-shelf solutions running natively on AWS. Examples can be Temenos Core Banking Solution, Infor on AWS, Guidewire on AWS, et cetera. We see a lot of customers rehosting when you need a rapid exit from contracts that might be very inflexible. We see that a lot of customers are using partners, AWS partners like Ensono, Kyndryl, to bring their mainframes as close to the cloud as possible to reduce the latency levels and almost co-locate these applications. We also see, of course, there's retention and retire of applications because mainframe applications or products on them have a life cycle, and as the product life cycle goes, the mainframe retires or gets retained and then eventually retires. Finally, we are seeing actually that customers are starting to reimagine their applications. That if your enterprise is basically dependent on some applications and that gives you competitive advantage in the market, you want to start thinking about actually deploying it very differently in the cloud. So we are seeing limited rewrite, re-architecture, sometimes, for example, thinking about batch processing, parallelizing the batch and re-architecting that in a very different way in the cloud. So those are other patterns that people are deploying. Just to pause for a moment and have a little bit of feedback from audience, the QR code here, there's a polling question. If you can share with us what kind of patterns you are deploying. Oh, good. Can we see the responses? That's amazing. So we can see there's a lot of replatform, 31% replatform, 23% refactor, 25% re-architect, 15% augment, and replace 6%. That actually aligns very well to our experience. If you can go back to the slides. So just, a lot of customers, a lot of times customers ask me this question that you can do this with smaller mainframes, but my mainframe is super complex. It's very large. I don't think we can do it with this. And my answer to them is that you'd be surprised. Actually, we are seeing a lot of large customers with large mainframes embark on this journey with AWS. So we've got Itaú Bank and Cigna here today. We also have companies like State Farm, Fidelity Investments, and more modernizing their very complex mainframe estates with AWS. So what we try to do as AWS, what we are trying to do is to help our customers reduce the time, cost, and risk of these modernizations. We built a dedicated service called AWS Mainframe Modernization service. This is essentially a platform service, which is basically integrating a lot of best-in-class tool sets from the market with the AWS Cloud in order to provide a variety of patterns and a range of patterns that customers can use, because in our experience, no single mainframe modernization can deploy only one pattern, and customers will need a choice, and customers will need to be able to use multiple patterns in order to execute these journeys. So on the left-hand side, you will see that we've got technologies that support strategic migrations such as replatform and automated refactor. These are basically tool-based accelerators for automating modernizations for our customers that will reduce the time of the journey, and due to automated refactoring, et cetera, we can reduce the risk as well as ensure that we are providing you automated testing services to drive those modernizations. We also support, of course, in the same process, manual rewrite as well as repurchase of applications and helping helping you integrate third-party solutions onto AWS Cloud while you're modernizing your legacy code. On the right-hand side, you will see the augmentation and integration patterns. These are the patterns we are offering to our customers to allow a connectivity between the mainframe and AWS Cloud, because these modernizations will take some time. So what we are doing is first helping our customers offload their MIPS by perhaps bringing backup and archival functions into AWS, or perhaps reducing the read-only MIPS that are usually used by chatty applications on the mainframe, and bringing that on to AWS Cloud through toolsets such as Precisely, which offer change data control and real-time replication into AWS. So AWS Mainframe Modernization Service is a fully managed runtime that is offered to our customers, pre-integrated with the cloud. It's also it's a reference architecture. It offers it offers a sandbox and services that you need, fully integrated with the DevOps and CI/CD tool sets, including third-party tool sets like Git and Jenkins. It's basically integrating third-party tool sets and offering that as a consumption-based service rather than as an upfront license, and it allows you to scale up and down with your usage. So just also to share that, yesterday we made a series of announcements because our intention is to offer customers maximum choice. So in addition to replatform, which is powered by Micro Focus, and refactor, which is powered by Blue Age, and augmentation patterns powered by Precisely and Model 9, yesterday we made announcements for file transfer with BMC, replatform with entity data, Unikix, to expand the number of tool sets that customers can use, and perhaps address specific problems such as IMS. We looked at Resource Manager from Kyndryl. That's added on to provide managed services layer on top of M2, AWS Mainframe Modernization Service. We've added mLogica to tackle challenges of assembler and easy-to-retrieve conversions. And we are doing data replication for AS400s with Precisely. We're already doing with Z-Series. We've added AS400s as well. We're also supporting our customers in mid-range modernizations, such as AS400s, Sparks. So we've added Stromases to support these journeys. And we continue to evolve. We launched application testing service. 70% of the cost actually goes into application testing, and that's a key area of definition. That's where we are investing. And we've also launched artificial intelligence demos, so anybody who's interested in those, please contact me outside the session, and we can share with you what we've got. Very quickly, in addition to the AWS Mainframe Modernization Service, we are also supporting our customers in basically providing dedicated mainframe teams with knowledge of these systems to enable our customers to use them and deploy them much faster. Not only do we have engineering teams, we have also got solutions architects who are basically collecting customer feedback and requests and taking that back to our engineering team so we can add more components to the AWS Mainframe Modernization Service. We've built a mainframe competency. We've curated a large number of partners, and we've created, of course, our own professional services competency, which supports these partners in delivering these large-scale migrations. And we've created this partner network. At this point, we have 12 GSIs and 8 technology partners so that we can leverage that expertise from partners and curate that knowledge and provide it back to our customers and other partners who are eager to learn through our Skill Builder program on AWS Cloud. And of course, finally, we support our customers with the investments in assess, mobilize, and migrate stages through our MAP program. If I can invite Casey from Cigna Group to tell us about his experiences.
Thank you, Maddie. My name is Casey O'Connor. I am the Senior Director of Tech Strategy and Modernization for Evernorth Health Services, which is a subsidiary of the Cigna Group. Evernorth offers a portfolio of health services, coordinated and point solutions to really help make healthcare more affordable, more accessible for people. It includes pharmacy benefit services, a specialty pharmacy, and care services. And so I joined them about 2 years ago, moving through a series of cloud roles. Earlier this year, I joined this project that was already underway. And so in looking at, everything came in with some opinions, based on my experience, software engineering and solution architecture background from financial services, GE Capital and Wells Fargo, where we had done a replatform at GE Capital, and we did some refactoring to Java when I was at Wells Fargo moving into that. So the benefit that I had coming into the organization is that I knew that mainframe modernization was possible. And so I approached the problem as, how do we prove that we can get this to work here, as opposed to how do we prove if it works. So the objectives that we looked at as we came into mainframe modernization were, we have 3 LPARs running today on our mainframe, and we were seeing excessive growth over 10%, somewhere around 13% year over year. And we had workloads being driven from digital adoption, customer service, really tied to, as we grew our business, our mainframe costs were growing as well. So we wanted to look at ways of offloading, especially the read transactions, so that we could allow the workloads that were harder to migrate room to grow. So again, the other part was, as we're improving all of our digital assets, we're moving them to the cloud, and we also wanted to allow ourselves the ability to decouple some of the relationships back to our on-premises data. So in the end, we wanted a platform that was secure, scalable, and gave us the agility that we needed to be able to scale up and down as our workloads changed throughout the day and through the seasonality that we have in our business. So what did our journey look like? Again, I joined about a year ago. We had broken the assessment up. I came in after the assessment was done, and we had surveyed a lot of the applications. But coming in and looking at it, we approached the problem breaking it down into waves. So we worked with AWS Professional Services, the mainframe modernization product teams, Blue Age, Accenture, working through some of the Micro Focus conversion, pulling all of this solution together. And so for Wave 0, we set up a foundational platform. We didn't want to have to do a data platform for Blue Age and a separate data platform for what we were building on Micro Focus. So we saw where the similarities were, where we could combine efforts and set up that foundational infrastructure so that we could get to compliance, reliability, operational readiness once, and share that across the overall platform. There was some proof points in how we went about selecting the applications that we would target, and we went after our highest MIPS utilization services that were driving the most load first. These were also the most complicated services that we had across our entire ecosystem, services that were cutting across multiple mainframe applications with the common modules and everything else. So we were able to prove the refactor solution, functional equivalence with 800,000 lines of code across 20 some odd applications, the replatform solution across 25, 27 applications, 3.2 million lines of code. So 4 million lines of code was in our first wave as we went through this. And so we went through, looked at it, and recognized that as part of that learning process, we'd have to initiate change data capture. So we had tried some alternate approaches there. Could we copy the data off, and migrate stuff with its various information life cycles, and we recognized quickly that change data capture was the way to go there. So putting all that through Wave 1, what we were able to do was verify the financial forecasts that we had, make sure that we were approaching the problem, that our sizings were right, and we got some nice surprises there. Wave 2, through the lessons of Wave 1, we realized that we wanted to focus more on refactoring as we went forward, looking more at Blue Age and more Java. And that's really when we also focused on winning the hearts and minds of all of our development community and recognizing all of the change that we needed. And so Wave 1 and Wave 2 are still in flight as of right now. Wave 3 and beyond is where we're focused for next year going forward, and that's going to be, again, more acceleration of reimagine opportunities by saying what are the common codes that we can pull in and then leverage and expand on. And so we'll still be looking at MIPS as a primary driver, but we may have other factors at play now that helps us better prioritize as we go. So our decision process, when we looked at Wave 1, we saw the refactoring of the COBOL applications to Java and Spring on AWS worked. We were able to get through all of that. We saw the same with the COBOL. And so we went into this thinking that the replatform would save us, lots of time moving, and we really didn't see that much of a variation moving the COBOL code or moving to Java. And so that was a key learning for us. Both of them, we were able to get functional equivalence on, performance equivalence. We were able to see the path forward there through the extensive data replication that we had to do. We initially tried going back to the mainframe for data. Don't do that. Then some of the learnings, again, when we were comparing runtime costs, the Blue Age runtime very cost effective when it comes to being able to take the code and process and run it, on open source technology, made us very comfortable. And that sort of fed into how we were building the new applications, Spring Boot, Java, so we saw a path forward to leverage more of those assets on a go-forward basis. The development side of it, with the developers needing to learn new frameworks and things like that, what we found is our partners are actively out there training the resources on our account today in Java, getting them certified through AWS Mainframe Modernization competency so that they have, Blue Age level 1, level 2 certifications. So they're actively working on getting us the talent in our teams who are already subject matter experts. And as we've worked through our Blue Age process, we still uncover things. We have code that's 40 years old in some cases, and the way that it's been maintained over time tests the limits of the Spring framework and Java even. And so we've had to work around that and work with the product team, and they've been very responsive as we've gone for enhancements. So our platform. From a developer tool standpoint, what was very important to me, I've been doing DevOps work, since cruise control and some of the earliest technology within that field. And it was important to me to make sure that the mainframe tools that we were migrating, that we had that approach from the very beginning. And so we did a bake-off against our enterprise dev pipelines and just saw that we needed an exception for the mainframe modernization code. It was big, it was unwieldy, on our on-premise infrastructure, had some challenges there. So we went for AWS code pipeline and code build and code deploy and are using those tools to help us move forward and some of the managed container offerings to help us build. Our vSAM data pipeline was another challenge for us as we went through. We're using SFTP off the mainframe to AWS transfer family, landing that on EFS, and then depending upon whether it's Blue Age or going to our Micro Focus instances, we're then splitting those files off and appropriately landing them on the EBS volumes or in Postgres. For our replatform and our refactor side, we have put in place for security, web application firewalls. We're using API gateways. We have our load balancers going back to fleets of instances. On the Micro Focus side, we're scaling them based on a schedule. On the AWS side, we have the Blue Age runtime scaling on demand. And so we really like the scalability features because it allows us to add and subtract resources throughout the day as our business needs change. We have hotspots, and as I'm sure most of you do, for this real-time traffic. And so that allows us, to be able to control costs effectively. And then we have our databases there, and so as I said, we're doing a lot of the CDC replication into them, and that's a shared database across each of the solutions. So tool set lessons. We've learned a lot. My prior experience, we did Big Bang. And so when doing Big Bang, you don't think about the incremental workflows as much. And so we've spent a lot of time looking at, how do things work with refactor, with replatform, with the hearts and minds, and how do we look at the code better so that we can accelerate? And so some of the things that we needed to say, how do we keep as things change? How do we keep the startup transactions that we use to feed our CICS regions? How do we keep that in sync with what we're migrating out to AWS? And then, because our code bases are mixed of read, write transactions, how do we really get to understand that? And that's where our test cases and dynamic code analysis and things like that have really helped us narrow down the scope of what's actually used. I was having a conversation earlier about a prior project where we went from 60 million lines of source code down to 16 million. And so we're only touching a fraction of the code in our environment with the 4 million lines of code that we're modernizing now. But by using techniques like this, we're trying to narrow the scope of what we actually have to touch. And these are my lessons learned. So, again, as I said, I came into this as it was going, and we had it described as a pilot, but, mindset, the POC mindset as very experimental science project almost, versus the pilot mindset of, we will run this in production. And so having that attitude, having that mindset that it's possible and you can move forward, and the decisions that you make are, how do I land this in production successfully, changes how you approach certain problems. And so bringing that to the team, I think, was essential. Data migration in parallel. We should have started on our data migration journey with the future state from the beginning. We started on CDC too late, thinking that we could get by with other methods, and that was probably informed from the POC versus pilot mindset, but we should have started on that earlier. So move your data, move it up, move it in parallel, move it up front, but consider the data first. Developer impact. So here's where messaging across the organization, all of your change acceleration process, you can't just rely on the top-down messages. We were seeing things filtered. So we had to set up office hours. We had to communicate in town halls. We had to get directly to the people touching the code in order to help them understand what the impact of change was. And then operational excellence, no shortcuts here. We did extensive failure mode effect analysis. We did extensive game days, extensive monitoring, just to make sure that the resiliency of the new platform could match the expectations of 40 years of lessons learned on the mainframe. So outcomes. By next year, we expect to have 25% of our read-only workflows moved off from a traffic migration perspective, allowing our additional applications room to grow. Risk-based failure modes, as we discover and continue to improve the platform, will improve there. And then we're looking again to accelerate those reimagine opportunities. So we look at the ways to improve. We look at the areas in our business that have years and years of business knowledge built into our code. How do we take those, use the Blue Age technology to bring that to AWS, and then wrapper that with the other business logic that we want to change how our business works and operates. So appreciate your time, and Tiago.
Thank you, Casey. Hello, everyone. It's working, okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Tiago Moraes. I'm the head of cloud platform at Banco Itaú. And let's talk a little bit about our journey to the cloud. So we are almost a 100 years old company. So we provide full service bank for our customers. We have operations in Latin America and Europe and US. We In Latin America, we are evaluated as the most valued brand, so with $8.7 billion in evaluation, and we have 97,000 employees overseas and in Brazil. Out of those 97,000 employees, 12,000 are engineers, so they are working in day-to-day basis, working with mainframe or AWS or on the on-premise platforms. So how we started our journey. So we started in 2017 with the private cloud. At that moment in Brazil, we didn't have the chance or we didn't have the authorization from the central bank to operate public cloud. So we took the decision to iterate on top of the private cloud and see how our teams will adapt to the platforms, understand what are the skills that we should grow internally to support this transformation. In 2018, the central bank in Brazil allowed us to move workloads to the production workloads to the AWS Cloud. So we started our journey on accelerating, moving, and building solutions into the cloud. But first, we understood with AWS, in a partnership with AWS, that we needed to create a cloud operating model that would support us to accelerate the journey. So here, one key takeaway, it's imperative if you're moving to the cloud, try to create your cloud operating model. So it's important because it's a change management process. You have not only changed the technology, but also how you organize your company to provide the right experience and take advantage of this transformation within the company, okay? And in 2023, right now, we're trying to evolve that to think about a platform. So Casey mentioned that, so how to build a platform, but not only think about it as a platform, but also try the product management perspective on top of what we are building. So we're calling here a product operating model as what we're calling internally. Some of the results that we have so far with this modernization journey, we have 5,900 certifications, AWS certified employees, so certification, sorry, through this journey. So it's one of the largest programs of certification programs in the world. We also reduced 98% of incidents in our platform since we started this journey, moving workloads to the cloud, so we could reduce the impact of our customers, so when we're making changes or publishing changes into our production environment. Also, we increasing 13 times the number of changes compared to when we started the journey to the cloud. So comparing 2018 to 2023, we had a huge increase in velocity to deploy new features into the platform. And last, we are now at 50% of our modernization strategy or modernization journey with our business services. So how the role of the mainframe presents here now. So how some big numbers around our mainframe platform. Right now we have 1,300 business services on our platform that runs on top of mainframe. So here business services are journeys or services that we provide to our end user and comprises a set of multiple workloads to deliver that journey to our users. We use three transaction monitors, 6 MIS, and GRBE is our homegrown transaction monitor. So we started this at 40 years ago, I believe that late 80s. So we still have this going. And also we process 9 billion transactions per day on our platform. When we decided to go into our modernization strategy, we had two major objectives or major strategies. Think about business service quality. So Casey mentioned that. So how to think about quality since the beginning, and also how to provide a good experience to our users and also to our business. So how we would change the competitiveness of the business as we move to go through this modernization. So we wanted to reduce complexity as we go, so how to build software and reduce the complexity that we had as we grew into the mainframe. So we understood that we had a lot of complexity on how to operate and orchestrate that. Reduce coupling because we had those monoliths, so how we operate that. Faster time to market, so how to, from the idea to value, so how we could iterate quicker and provide value to our customers as we go. And also integration with existing environment that we had, that more than 40 years of code there, we need to think about how to provide integration and coexistence as we go. And also observability and analytics. So it's imperative that you build that from the beginning in your platform so you can have the right toggles to see what's going on once you go to production. So how do we decide what to rewrite and what to replatform? So for the rewrite, we understood that if we were thinking about transformation of a user experience, we need to go to the rewrite approach. So we understood that it's not only a matter of modernizing the platform, but also modernizing the experience of the customer. So how they iterate or consume our services through the mobile app or through the web applications that we provide them. So based on this, we decided that these should be prioritized with the business criticality and business impact that will provide to our customers and to our business. And the replatform approach would be for systems or platforms that had no functional changes in the midterm or long term, or no plans to retire at that moment. And also how to gain scalability and replicable patterns as we go and as we modernize those systems. We understand that there are certain patterns on those softwares that will allow us to gain scale as we move. And later, we understood that we need to create some tooling to provide this integration more seamless, like a platform for integration between the inbound requests and outbound requests between the cloud and the mainframe and the mainframe in the cloud. Okay. So part of the rewrite approach here, we thought about the foundation. So it's imperative that how do you write or build software that streamline the approach to set out the foundation of your accounts. So when you're going through AWS, think about how you create the pipelines to provision accounts in a scalable way. It's imperative to do that because once you start reaching a momentum of creating those accounts or modernize, it's imperative that you have a right foundation. Plugging in security, observability, guardrails, so you make sure that even with all the pipelines, sometimes you messed up. So we are engineers, so we messed up. We put some code that is might hurt the customer, so the guardrails are imperative to support you with that. Think about the coupling, so how you design your architectures or microservices, so how you design them, it's imperative that you take advantage of the cloud by doing this. So microservices, think about scalability. Scale, it's painful, so it breaks everything, so think about scale all the time while you're building your software, building your solutions. Think data-driven, so how you provide extension points or to export your data and build or thinking about building your data mesh platform. And also think about this on how you design to scale or to evolve. So think about that. It's a long-term view. Try to avoid as much as you can have the legacy of the cloud. So think about how you can evolve the platform as you go. Lessons learned here, think about prioritization. So it's important. So how you prioritize what to tackle first. So it's hard. So what are the big problems or big rocks that you want to move first? So it's imperative that you prioritize that. Coexistence. So you have to think that it's not from flip a switch and you have moving your workloads to the cloud and you're good. There are a lot of integrations that it's been there for years. So now you have to think about how you move those legacy integrations to your new platform, and then you can retire the old platform and the deprecation, sorry. Think about cost. So I didn't put here, but cost is very important. So when you have the coexistence of your legacy application and your cloud applications, that you have to put that on paper and think how you're gonna reduce the bubble that you have both systems running for a certain period of time. So it's important to think about this. Some of the numbers that we have with our rewrite strategy. So we reach 55% of modernization of our business services. So it's still going. So we moved most of those workloads to the cloud right now through this rewrite strategy. So we did a good job in this first part of our strategy. We had 27% more faster feature release. So as we created or evolved our pipelines, we reached a point that now we have the maturity that the teams can evolve and iterate on top of the pipelines that we have. So the idea to value, it's important. So the idea to value accelerated as we go, as we understood how to operate in the cloud. And also, we measure business complexity points, so we reduce the hour per business complexity point in 4%. Through this modernization, we created some tools to support our engineers to build good solutions on top of AWS. I'm going to highlight just two here, the tools, the IU Confia. It's an internal tool that we based on top of the well-architected framework. So based on the questions that we have, that the AWS provides for the well-architected framework, we create a set of guardrails and tooling to provide visibility to the account owners or application owners, how they are doing in comparison to the well-architected framework. So this helps us make or evolve our platform and evolve our solutions thinking about cost, security, availability, so we can put new questions or new checks to new applications and help the engineers to evolve their platform. And also, when I mentioned about the foundation, we created a solution called Cloud for You that's pretty much a control plane to provision accounts on AWS. So here we provision accounts for the dev, OML, QA, and production. So this way we can have like a streamlined approach to have governance on how we scale the accounts on AWS. Now, for the replatform approach, so we tried as much as we can replicate what we have or what we learn using the AWS platform and replicate that to the replatform strategy. So since the beginning, we tried as much as we could to set up a landing zone for those new workloads that we are replatform to AWS. And leveraging zero functional changes, so as much as we can, we don't have to change the code or how that functional implementation was in the mainframe. We want to, as is, move to the new platform. We had a very important concern with the engineers, so we didn't want to change their experience moving to this new way of working. So it's really important that you work that through, and also communication, as Casey mentioned. How do you communicate and how do you drive the reskilling of the team if needed to this new strategy? Think about data integration again. So Casey brought this up, and think about the data integration and how you push data to your data mesh. So how you are building your data strategy on top of this replatform, it's really important. And again, thinking about scalability, observability, and self-service as much as you can. So try to leverage the DevOps approach to how you replatform your platform. Some of the results that we achieved so far, out of those 1.3 thousand business services, 21 of the workloads that we had there was our home loan services. So we took the approach to experiment or do a POC with this specific workload and try to move that with the replatform strategy. So we achieved 27.5% of this migration or this replatform using this home loan service. From scratch, so from where we started or decided to move or take the replatform strategy, took us 12 months from planning to deployment in production, this home loan platform. Based on this, the execution of this modern replatform strategy, we started identifying patterns that we could document and understand and replicate that to other workloads and try to find similar workloads that we could leverage the same experience of this replatform, and from there start scaling the process of modernizing other applications. We found close to 10,000 MIPS from those patterns. So we started now assessing other workloads that might help us be successful on this replatform strategy. Same thing here, we created or we are leveraging a lot of those, the tooling that it's provided from AWS and also from Micro Focus to accelerate this strategy. So here we try to compile real quick some of the tooling that we are using to accelerate that migration and accelerate that strategy. How is the future so far? We started in 2022 the home loan pilot that we successfully executed, and we are taking the gains right now after this replatform. So we're starting now to accelerate that for 2023, 2024, so how we scale that out to other workloads. For rewrite, we reached 1,500 business services that we already successfully rewrite and migrated to AWS. And we're gonna continue to scale this strategy to other workloads and using that matrix that I presented later, so how we decided what we're gonna rewrite and what we're gonna replatform, sorry. And also, we are starting to experiment generative AI to help the rewrite strategy. So we have a lot of legacy code that it's very complex, so we can have leverage generative AI to look at this code and how we can generate code or migrate code to different, more modern languages that will help us scale, okay? Thank you, everyone. Maddie?
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your insights. Just to summarize that, if I may, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the complex modernizations basically are achieved best through strangler pattern. In the strangler pattern, the way you have approached this is to break down all your applications, understand them, categorize them, identify the patterns that you're going to deploy. Then what you've done is used pilots rather than POCs to actually learn lessons that can help you in production, and then create the wave strategy for yourself to identify future waves. You've also been able to release cost by taking down MIPS in consecutive cycles, building momentum for that change and helping your own organizations in that change management journey. And you've been able to execute this over a period of time rather than doing it in a hurry, in a big bang model, by creating hybrid architectures which enable cloud and the mainframe to communicate, and by creating interim architectures to enable these changes. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah, a fair one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate this. And I'd like to open up for any questions, if there are, from audience. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate your presence here and enthusiasm.